If you're born in India, you're probably a Hindu. If you're born in America, you're probably a Christian. If you're born in Pakistan, you're probably a Muslim. That's a coincidence, isn't it? That you're always born into the right God. Always, isn't that lucky? I was born into the right God. All those others are going to hell, but I was born into the right religion. I'm going to heaven.
For people who say we ought not be involved politically, we just ought to preach the gospel, I always say, guess what? Your ability to preach the gospel legally is based on politics.
One of the signs that the second coming is that the stars will fall out of the sky and land on earth. So to even write that means you don't know what those things are. You have no concept of what the actual universe is.
You can separate God from religion, which is what I do. I believe in God. I believe in me. Same person.
Well, welcome. We're glad that you're here with us today at Chaparral. Just a reminder again that in 2 weeks, on the 18th, we are going to one service at 10 o'clock with something fun afterwards. So we're doing a series called Flip Side, and we'll be looking at the Beatitudes from Matthew chapter 5. But really the idea is community, is coming together, being in one service together in the summer, then doing something fun afterwards. So at 11 o'clock, after the service at 10, we're going to be doing Fun Day Sunday on the 18th, which will be Sundays and splash pad type stuff and inflatables. Great time. So I hope you'll be here and invite your friends to that. So right now we're doing this short series and looking at these pretty serious and relevant questions like you saw in the bumper video there today, that oftentimes Christians or the church are labeled or things are stated about us. Now, sometimes those things that are stated, those labels that we're given, we've earned. Right? Historically, the church has not always done the right thing, and because of that, we get labeled. At the same time, there's other times when we are unfairly labeled, or things are said about us that are unfair, or assumptions made about who we are, or what we believe, and we can't help that. So what we need to do is start off with simply finding out and asking, what do we stand for? More than what we're against, what are we for? What does it mean to be a Christian? How do we feel about these hot button type topics, and what does that mean for us? And in the context of that, we said that from the very beginning, our goal is to be respectful, that we want to open avenues of conversation and not confrontation. We're not here to yell at each other or to make lines in the sand, that kind of stuff. We want to have a conversation about some of these big issues. And the ground rules, we said, comes out of 1 Peter, where it's written, always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an accounting for the hope that is within you. So you got to know what you believe. You got to understand what you believe. You got to be able to talk about what you believe and share that. But also it says, yet do it with gentleness and reverence. So the how you do it is even more important. So we want to be right, but more than that, we want to be righteous. We want to engage the debate in a way that is respectful and kind and compassionate. How we do those things matters. Now, last week we looked at this label that Christians are anti-science, that we're against science. We said that's not even close to being true. In fact, we said that the scientific method was developed inside the church by Francis Bacon, that the church has a lot to learn from science. And science has a lot to learn from theology. And a lot of you had mentioned that message, and it is available on YouTube for those who are interested in that. And we want to talk more about that later, but the idea is that, the two should and can talk together. We learn things from creation about who God is, and we should do those things. So science and religion work together. This week, we're going to get a little more personal. We're going to talk about your experiences this week and things that have a personal history. And we're going to talk about, are Christians exclusive and judgmental? We get labeled that a lot. And in fact, statistics show, both inside the church and secular studies, have shown that a lot of folks have left the church over the years because they feel that they're being judged, or they feel that the church is too exclusive for them. is that a true statement? And what does that mean for us? Because those statistics on those reports are people. Don't forget that. When there's a statistic given about people leaving the church or this, that, or the other, there are stories behind that. We're after those stories. Maybe some of you know people who've experienced a time in the church when they were being judgmental, or maybe you felt judged, or people that you know have left because they felt the church was overly exclusive and judgmental. And you can give names to those stories. Maybe that's you. If that is you, if you felt in the past that the church has been judgmental of you or too exclusive, I'm glad you're here, that we can talk about this issue. Because it's much more difficult than just a black and white statement. Because at the heart of this is a much deeper issue. How does the church handle something we call sin? That's what this is getting at, right? Exclusive and judgmental. I mean, the root part of that is, how do we handle sin? What's the church's approach to sin in our lives, in the lives of the church, in the world in general? Are we called to be judgmental to a certain degree? Is that our role, to be judges of sin? If it is, how does that work? If it's not, what does that look like? So again, a much bigger set of questions. Because the thing is, the truth is, we can't run from this because we live in the world. And the world is full of sin. Like it or not, that's the truth. And because I can say that because we're part of it, all of us. In the book of Romans, Paul writes, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All. You and me included. All. Everyone except Jesus. All of us have fallen short of the glory of God. We got to admit that. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we live in a world that is often hostile to God and that is itself full of sin. It's just a reality from the very beginning. In 2 Timothy, Paul writes this, again, 2,000 years ago. He said, "For the time is coming when people will not put up with sound doctrine, but they have itching ears. They will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own desires, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander away to myths." It happened then, it happens today. People will listen to what they want to hear, get their perspectives, and stick with it. Jesus in Matthew 10 said this, "Then many will fall away, and they'll betray one another and hate one another, and many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because of the increase of lawlessness, the love of many will grow cold." That's a scary statement, but it's here, that we live in a world of sin, a world that is often dark. Now, at the same time, we're not allowed to sequester ourselves away. We can't say, "Whoa, that's bad, we're good, let's just kind of get in a little holy huddle and get away from all that in a little Christian group and just kind of do our little Christian thing with our Christian friends and our Christian stuff." Because in 1 Corinthians 5, Paul talks about that too. He said, "I wrote you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral persons, not at all meaning the immoral of this world, or the greedy and the robbers, or the idolaters, since you would need to go out of the world." He says, look, you're going to have to deal with the world is what he's saying. You can't leave it. You got to deal with it and be in it. Because we are called to make disciples of all nations. So this problem of being judgmental and exclusive, that's a real issue because we got to figure out how to be holy and followers of Jesus and obey his commandments, and at the same time live in a world that oftentimes is hostile to that. How do we do that? How do we share Christ with the world in a way that isn't judgmental and exclusive? And the truth is, we're honest with ourselves, that throughout history, the church has often done it wrong. Ever see those little memes on photos on the internet? It says, "You're doing it wrong," right? We do that sometimes. Like these photos here, football, tackling, you're doing it wrong, right? You tackled the other guy. Okay, how about this one here? Boating, you're doing it wrong. The boat goes in first. Okay, this one, GPS, probably not the best way to do that, kind of distracting. Carpooling, you're doing it wrong if your car's in the pool. And this last one's more personal. This one, Bluetooth. Now, this photo, I found this week again. This photo's like 20 years old. Now, Stacy remembers this photo, right, Stacy? All right, so story of this photo, real quick. About 15 years ago, I guess now, Stacy and I went to India. I was teaching a class on the Gospel of Matthew to a bunch of ministers in southern India. So we flew there, and we didn't know anybody, of course. We didn't know the language. We land at this airport in Kerala, India, and there's supposed to be someone to meet us there to take us to the hotel. We get there, and we're just standing there, no one. Like, everyone leaves, gets their bags, they leave. We're sitting with our bags, and there's just like nobody in the airport. We're thinking, what do we do? We can't even call a cab. We don't know anything. We're kind of like, there's two ladies walking around us, like kind of like walking and kind of looking. It was kind of creepy, right? You're like, what are you guys doing? We're trying to see our name tags on our luggage. Well, they get close enough finally, and they can read that the name is Shervinsky, right, which is kind of a unique name. And they see that and like, oh, you're Frank and Stacy. We're like, yeah? Well, you don't look like your picture at all. What are you talking about? We didn't send you a picture. Well, my secretary had sent them all the information about us and when we're landing and all that kind of stuff. Well, my secretary liked to tell jokes and forward emails. Well, she had this attached to an email that she sent them. I'm not kidding. So they thought this was me. And so they're looking for this dude with a phone strapped to his head, and that wasn't me. But that's the story of this photo. True story. But the reality is, sometimes as Christians, when it comes to dealing with sin in the world, we're doing it wrong. So we want to talk about that today. We're going to look at a story of Jesus that kind of gets to the heart of this. It's a story that is often quoted, rarely studied. Okay, we look at this story, we know the quotes from it, but we don't know like the whole story behind it. And it's actually a very interesting, multifaceted story. So we'll be in the Gospel of John, and in this story, Jesus is toward the end of his ministry. He's back in Jerusalem, and he's been teaching people in the temple precincts, in the temple area. And he's tired from the day. He goes off to the Mount of Olives to pray, just to rest. And the next morning, he gets up, and he heads back to the temple to teach again. So verse 2 of chapter 8. Early in the morning, he came into the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down to teach them. Now notice that he isn't like making a stir. He's not making a big revolt or cause a big problem or making, a scene. He is simply going there to teach. That's it. And people are coming to him. Now why are they coming to him? Because he is saying something that connects with them or with the truth. Again, not making a scene, not making a big deal. He simply goes and starts teaching, and they start showing up. But the religious leaders see this. And they see their authority being questioned. They see their popularity being pushed off to this Jesus. And they begin to become jealous. And they got a problem with what he is doing when all he is doing is teaching about what God has for his people. Verse 3, the scribes and the Pharisees, these religious leaders of the day, brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. And making her stand before all of them, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery." So like they literally caught her committing adultery, pulled her out of the room, took her and stood her before all these people Jesus is teaching, Jesus and all these religious leaders. Horrible thing. Now, first question though is, was she wrong? Right? I mean, did she commit a sin? Well, the answer is yes. They caught her in the act of adultery, right? 10 commandments. One of those commandments says don't commit adultery. She was doing that very thing. So number one, she was wrong, right? She had broken God's laws, broken her marriage covenant, betrayed her family. All those things are true. Second, where's the guy? Right? I mean, it takes two to tango, and he's not here. And that's a problem because the law says in Deuteronomy and Leviticus that he should be there too. So are they after justice? Are they after the truth? No. They're after making a statement. The third thing is, do they care about her at all? Are they there to help her? No. They're there to humiliate her. In fact, beyond that, they don't care about her even that much. What they're after is Jesus. And she's just a pawn in that game. And this is just public humiliation to get what they want. Jesus taught the opposite of this kind of behavior. He said, yeah, when people are going to sin, and they're going to sin against you and against me. It's going to happen. People are going to hurt you. They're going to say things about you. They're going to do things against you. It's going to happen. But how you handle it, you don't just drag them out in front of a court of people or post it on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat what kind of jerk this person was. You don't do those things. In fact, Jesus says in Matthew 18, if another member of the church sins against you, so they started. They were the first ones. Go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. So go to a person one-on-one. Don't post it. Go. Because then you may be able to fix it. There's no drama. There's no other people involved. Go to them one-on-one. Talk to them. Because what's important is not being right, but being righteous. Restoring the relationship, because what's important here. Jesus was concerned about the people. And when it comes to sin, remember this one thing. When it comes to sin, Jesus does not forgive sins. And that sounds kind of weird, but Jesus does not forgive sins. Jesus forgives us. He forgives us, the people, the relationship. He forgives you and me. That's what's important. And that's what he comes to save and to help. So here's this woman, completely humiliated before the temple court. Verse 5, now they say to Jesus, in the law of Moses, they commanded us to stone such a woman. Now what do you say? They said this to test him so that they might have some charge to bring against him. So now we get the truth. They're looking for justice at all. They don't care about her at all. They're trying to trap Jesus. And here's the thing. They don't want to know what Jesus thinks. They know what he thinks. This is at the end of his ministry. They know who he is. They know that he cares about the poor, that he has compassion, that he forgives sins, that he will eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners. He reaches out to them, spends time with them. So they know what he thinks. That he's compassionate. He forgives sin. He loves people. They know those things about him. What they want to do is to expose that. Show him breaking the law so they can get rid of him and get back to the way things normally are. Back to the status quo where they're in charge. They're not interested in hope or forgiveness at all. Verse 6. Jesus is sitting there, and he bends down, it says, and he wrote with his finger on the ground. All this is going on, and he just bends down and starts doodling. Now, we don't know what he's writing. I mean, everybody guesses. Some say the Ten Commandments. Some say the sins of the Pharisees. Some say he's doing a Sudoku puzzle. We don't know. Right? We have absolutely no idea what he is writing in the ground. None. But what's interesting to me is not what he's writing, but that he's doing something else. Now, there's this whole thing going on, this whole drama thing, right? There's this woman caught in adultery, all these religious leaders, all the people Jesus is trying to teach, his disciples, and he's like, they're just like almost like ignoring it. And it must have gone on for a while because the Pharisees and scribes start saying, hey, Jesus, hey, over here, we have a question. Come on, answer our question. They start badgering him. They want an answer right now. What's going on? And then finally it says he stands up. And we get the most quoted, or one of the most quoted lines in the New Testament. Verse 7. When they kept on questioning him, they're badgering him, he straightened up and said to them, let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. And once again, he bent down and wrote on the ground. He stands up, says one thing, and then sits back down again. Was he angry? Was he disappointed? Don't know. But he stands up. And he says something, we quote this a lot, like, one without sin, throw the first stone. We kind of use that a lot, right? I mean, if you're without sin, throw the first stone, that non-judgmental kind of statement. But what we miss often, to me, in this story, is two words that are the most important, I think, in what Jesus says here. He says, let anyone among you who's without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. I mean, we kind of forget this. We leave this off. But that's huge, because now it's personal. Throw it at her. I can see him pointing at her. Good, throw a stone at her, right there. I mean, how would you respond to ever point it out like that? Because now it's like looking back at them, because now it's personal. Now it's relational. Now they got to ask the question, what's my relationship with God like? Would I want to be treated like this if I had sinned and it was made public? Because now I'm throwing it at her. It's not some theological proposition or a law. It's personal. Throw it at her. Go ahead. Throw it at her. And it begins to reflect back on them. See, once we start looking at ourselves and things get personal, right? We start looking at how it is we get to the place of being judgmental or exclusive. And oftentimes, that place we get to begins with something very simple as just not listening. Just not listening. We kind of shut ourselves off and we quit listening because we're so latched into our own perspectives. I had a professor in seminary who used to say all the time, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, take the hint. Super true. We are really bad at listening, but really good at talking and telling what we want to say. You turn on the news today or talk radio, whatever, and you hear people just talking over each other all the time. Just they don't even listen at all. And that is the beginning, to me, of being judgmental. These scribes and Pharisees who brought this woman to Jesus, they weren't there to help her. They ignored her. They made her a pawn in what they were doing. Jesus has some pretty harsh words for this kind of attitude. In Matthew 23, he says to them there, "But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you lock people out of the kingdom of heaven. For you do not go in yourselves, and when others are going in, you stop them. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you cross sea and land to make a single convert," which is a big deal. A lot of effort. Cross land and sea to win one single convert. But when you do, you make them you make the new convert twice as much the son of hell as yourself. You make them worse than when it started. Because their attitude was not to help those people, but was to get the point across that they're right, that they have authority, that they can be judgmental and exclusive in that way. And it begins by simply not listening. What were they doing to encourage her from stopping what she was doing? Were they doing anything to help move her closer to God at all? No. And so we look at being judgmental and exclusive. That's kind of where the heart of it is. Do you care what the people that you're, quote, judging? Or are you trying to be right? Two totally different things. And you can see their attitude right here. And I think when the church is being judgmental in that way, we're not trying to help people, we're just trying to put them in little boxes, we're doing it wrong. We're drawing lines instead of building bridges. We're doing it wrong. When the church is trying to be a country club instead of a hospital to help people, we're doing it wrong. Jesus was here to help and to save. Now, the other thing we have to take a look at when being judgmental is this. Sometimes we look at people and say, they're just too far gone. Maybe they saw her that way. Here's this woman, she's caught in adultery. And like, you know what? She's just not worth saving. She's just too far gone. We'll use her for our own benefit. But there's nobody that's too far gone. Nobody, even you and me. In Isaiah 58, chapter 1, it says, "See, the Lord's hand is not too short to save, nor his ear too dull to hear." There's no one beyond the reach and the grace of God. So don't try to categorize them as, well, they're just too bad, so I can treat them differently. No, you can't. Nobody is beyond God's grace. That's what it says here in Isaiah. So now Jesus is sitting there, verse 8, and he bent down and wrote on the ground, and they're all just standing there. When they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the elders. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. So Jesus bends down, starts writing, and he doesn't badger them. Give me an answer to your question. What are you going to do? He just starts writing again. And they're sitting there facing this reality that they don't know what to do. I mean, do they throw a stone at her? Are they sinless? And slowly, one by one, those stones, those rocks, just kind of slip to the ground, hit the dirt, and they begin to walk away. I say it to their credit. I mean, they actually took time to look inside themselves. They took time to reflect. What I don't like, though, is they left. I mean, you think about it. Could she have left? Could she have walked away? Absolutely. Like she'd been like, I'm out of here, whew, missed that one. She didn't. She humiliated, yes, yet stays in front of Jesus. They leave. If we're convicted about sin, is walking away from Jesus the best response? No, not at all. It's staying close and learning. They could have stayed and learned, but they didn't. They walked away. Now let's skip over to verse 10. So she's standing there by herself, and Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, sir." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go on your way, and from now on, do not sin again." He doesn't condemn her. He says, "I'm not here to condemn you." In fact, throughout the Gospel of John, we see that about Jesus. In chapter 3, it says, "Indeed, God did not send the Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him." He came to save, not to condemn. Now, does that mean that sin doesn't count anymore? Or there's no judgment? No, that's not true at all. Right? There will be a judgment. Jesus said so himself. There will be a judgment. There will be an accounting. Sin still hurts. Sin still has consequences. Sin still hurts you and other people. Sin still bleeds all over the place onto the lives of other people. It is real and it is dangerous. And Jesus says to this woman, stop it. Quit sinning. It's not good for you. It's against God's commandments. Stop. But at the same time, he begins with compassion. He begins with grace and forgiveness. In Matthew 9, Jesus said this, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have come to call not the righteous, but the sinners." He came to rescue and to help and to heal. So the church needs to be a place of restoration and healing. Now still, we teach and make disciples. Right? We're called to make disciples, which means we are called to grow closer to Christ, to put sin out of our lives, to quit sinning. We're called to do those things, us ourselves, and help others do that too. But we begin with grace. We have to introduce people to Jesus first. And he came not to condemn, but to save. And once they meet Jesus, then they begin to follow him. But it begins with grace and compassion and growing. A few years ago, I read a book by a man named Fred Craddock. He was a professor at Emory, great teacher. He told this kind of parable that really kind of connects a lot of these dots from this story for me today. And what he has in this story was that there's this farmer. And the farmer's going home. It's late. It's kind of twilight. It's getting dusky. And he's hungry. He's cold. He's tired. So he decides to cut across the field. And as he does that, it gets darker and darker and darker. And he can't see where he's going really well. And he slips and falls into a cistern, like an old well. Boop, right into the bottom. A little water at the bottom. It's cold. There's moss growing on the sides of this cistern. And he can't get out. He can't grab on anything. He's kind of stuck. And he's tired. And finally, he cries out for help because he can't get out. He says, "Help me, somebody. Anybody, help me." He cries out and cries out. Finally, after hours of this, someone comes by. They hear him calling out. They walk up and they see John in the cistern. And he says to John, "Hey, John, I knew you'd end up there someday. Look at you, bottom of that cistern down there. What's your family going to think? Your kids and your wife going to think about you stuck in there? I knew you'd end up down there. I just knew it." And he walks off. He walks off saying to himself, "I have always wanted to say that to John." He keeps going. John keeps crying out. He's still hungry, still tired, still down at the bottom of the cistern. So he cries out again, "Help me, somebody." Well, someone comes along, a few people, actually 3 or 4, and they see what's going on. And they're like, "This is just wrong. I mean, this is what a pain, get this guy out of here. Tell you what, let's go back to town. We'll make a law that says there will be a $25 fine for falling in the well. So they go back to town, they get a little committee together, and they write a little law, nice little law that says, if you fall in the well, $25 fine. And they post a sign outside of it, statute number 4567, fine, $25 falling in the well. But John is still in the well. He cries out again, even more tired. Help me, somebody. A group of folks come along a little later, and they see this cistern and hear him crying out, and they go, man, this is not good for local business. This guy is stuck in a well. It's in the middle of nowhere, and yet people, if you have visitors come by, they're going to see it. It looks ugly, sounds terrible. Let's do this. Let's go back to town. We'll do a beautification project for the cistern. We're going to commit it together in a subcommittee and for flowers and planters and little gnomes, and we'll decorate it up. So they go back to town, this whole big plan. They get the funding, come back, and they decorate the entire cistern with flowers and little gnomes and little fountains, and it's really pretty. But John's still in the well. And he cries out again, somebody, desperate, help me. And finally someone comes along, looks in the well and sees John and says, John, I've been there. I know what that's like. I know how you're feeling. I know what you're struggling with. Let me help you. With a big, strong hand, he reaches into that cistern and pulls John out. Now, whose hand do you think that was that pulled John out of the cistern? It could be your hand. It should be your hand. And it should be my hand to reach out to those that are struggling and having a hard time, to pull them out of those wells and help them to meet Jesus, who came not to condemn, but to save. And help them grow into a deeper, meaningful relationship with Jesus. Not just for the future, but for their life today. He came to save, not just in the future, he came to save today. Let's pray together.